Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. Today, I'm talking about 6 really essential steps to launching your business. I wanted to talk about this because this is one of the times of year where a lot of people are leaving the profession, they're setting up their businesses. And if you're anything like me, you overthink. You try and get everything perfect from day one. And something that I've learned from 8+ years of doing this is that you often need less than 50% of what you think you need. So I want to streamline this for you. Whether you're at the start of your journey, whether you are just thinking about it and you want to take that leap, or whether you're relatively new but you've started and you just want to know that you're along the right tracks, this episode is for you. So let's get to it. Welcome to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host, Sumantha, and I'm so pleased you're here. As an education business owner myself and a former teacher, I understand the nuances that only apply to us. So in this podcast, I share fluff-free, tailored and actionable ideas that you can mould to suit your needs. If you'd like to take this conversation further, please do reach out. I would love to meet you. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. That way, you'll be helping me help more people. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy. I'm diving straight in today. When you get started, when you're launching, you often need to think that everything needs to be perfect and watertight and you think of all the possible what ifs and you think you need every base covered. The first reminder, and please remind yourself of this throughout your business journey, it helps me immensely. The first reminder is to remember you can change your mind anytime you like. You can make changes. I learn as I go along. I'll give you an example. When I set up my very first business, I was 22. It was a hair and makeup business, and I was going out and doing hair and makeup for brides. And I remember getting my very first client, and I had some basic terms and conditions in place. So anyway, I went out to this client, and it was in one of those Heathrow Airport hotels. Now, if you've ever been to any of those hotels, you'll know that the parking there is astronomical. I didn't even think of that. So I did the job, I got paid, everything was great. And then I paid for my parking, and I pretty much paid everything I'd earned. And that was my lesson learned. I then put in my terms and conditions that if I'm coming to you, if we're in a hotel or wherever, it's the client's responsibility to pay for my parking, to make arrangements, and so on. And when I started my tutoring business, which was many years later, I put that in there as well, because at the very beginning, I was actually traveling out to people. Then they started coming to me, then I went online and so on. So that part wasn't as relevant. The point here is that you can learn as you go along. You can change things as you go along. There's nothing wrong with that. So please don't feel under pressure to get everything perfect. And also don't overcomplicate things. That's also another really easy thing to do, especially nowadays. You see, when I started my tutoring business, there really weren't any online communities, Facebook groups, and things like that. So I just kind of followed my nose. I did what was I thought was logical. And then I remember when I did go online and I joined a lot of these groups, on the one hand, they were so useful, but on the other hand, they were really noisy and they did make me feel quite overwhelmed because all of a sudden people were saying you need to do this and you need to do that. And sometimes there were things I hadn't even thought of. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, usually you need less than 50% of what you think you need. So, I'll just break down just a couple of things that people often think they need before they can officially launch their business. The first one is a website. Now, a website can be a huge time drain, and unless your business model relies on it, it can wait. I'm not saying it's not useful. I have a website and it is useful, but you can have a digital presence, and that's really what it's about. You can have a digital presence now in many different ways. I have clients who have been successfully operating for a few years now, and they still don't have a website. And because they've seen they don't really need it, they're not inclined to create one. So I'm not saying not to ever have a website, but when you're launching, you don't need to have that as one of your primary things where you think without that you can't launch. People aren't going to take you seriously. Times have changed. you can still show your credibility in other ways. Another thing we often do is we create a logo. We think without a logo, we don't have a business. Now, again, this isn't essential. And the reality is, most of us are small, maybe will become medium businesses. Very few of us are large to the point where we're talking about companies like Apple and Google, and I can't think of any others, Ferrari. I'm trying to think of logos at the moment. With those situations, with McDonald's, for example, you recognize that logo. You only need to see that logo. You don't need to see anything else to know who that logo belongs to. But actually, with a lot of us, our personal brand will be more important. The best thing you can do is put your face front and center. So don't stress out about making sure you have a really nice logo in place. Again, if you want one, it can be a nice to have, but you don't need that before you launch. And now for your terms and conditions. As I mentioned earlier, these can keep evolving. You can keep changing them as time goes on. It's a good idea to have some basic terms and conditions just to cover the essentials. Things like a cancellation policy, a payment policy, expectations. I put my safeguarding in there as well. But once you've covered those basics, you're ready to go. You can always make changes as time goes on. Really, your priority should be to get those basics sorted so that you can start selling. In the Tutors Mastermind, I have a free course. It's just something I created in there to help people launch. And by module 2, before you've even started marketing, you're selling because you can sell without having all of these things in place. You definitely need a means for someone to contact you. They need to know how to contact you. You need clarity on what you're offering and you need pricing. They are the basics that you need in place. The rest of it can happen as time goes on. Your focus is to make sales. When you make sales, that's when you're a business, not when you have a logo. The second thing I want to talk about is selling before marketing. Many of us think that sales can only happen once we've nailed our marketing. Now, marketing is important, but it's also a long game. You can actually make sales without having it in place. That's not me saying that you shouldn't think about your marketing. Marketing is a really good way of staying front of mind, of making continuous sales, of expanding, of building an audience. Audience building in my business has been crucial because it's meant that every time I've launched something new, I have a warm audience to sell that to. I don't have to start from scratch. So you can focus on all of that, but you can also sell before you have that in place. For example, you can use your network. Let people know, tell them about what you're offering. To this day, 8 years on, I still get business from former colleagues when I used to work in school. I have a few teacher friends who I've met actually through the musical community, and they continue referring students to me. I have tutors in our network. Some of them actually send their children to me, but many of them actually recommend students to me as well. So use the network that you already have. You can use word of mouth. You don't need tons and tons of experience to get word of mouth working for you. Sometimes people just need a reminder. So if you've taught anyone before, tell them to spread the word. And then think about local outreach. Even if you teach online, some of these ideas can still be relevant. But of course, if you teach face to face, then local outreach is very valuable. So think about schools, communities, Facebook groups. There are loads of local Facebook groups. They can really help you get started. In fact, my local Facebook groups help me build my audience really fast. So instead of waiting until your marketing is perfect, keep learning, keep experimenting, get that marketing going, but you can also use what you already have around you to make sales. My third one is to charge like the expert you are. This is a big one, especially for experienced educators who are entering the business world. You might be new to running a business, but you're not new to teaching. So don't undercharge just because you're starting out. We often think that just because we're new to something, we should start low. Now, this part, it really depends on where you're at with your mindset and in your journey. So let's say, for example, you're thinking of a price and everyone's telling you that's too low, but you feel really nervous about increasing your price, then that's okay. Start with the low price. Yes, you might be undercharging, but when someone asks us, how much do you charge? We need to be able to answer that question with absolute confidence. If you increase your price and you can't say it with confidence, then you can always start from a place where you're charging a bit less, and then you can increase your prices as time goes on. You will find that once you start getting clients, your confidence when it comes to communicating pricing will also increase. So remember that your pricing is a communication tool, and everything about it, the price itself, the way you're communicating it, all of it should exude confidence. Think of it this way: if you don't believe in what you're offering, why would someone else? If you don't truly believe that what you offer is amazing, why would anyone else? You need to feel confident regardless of how much your pricing is. You need to feel confident regardless of how much you're charging. But if you can, charge what reflects your experience and the value you bring to the table rather than something that reflects that you're a new business owner. My fourth tip is to know when to say yes and when to say no. When you're starting out, it's really tempting to say yes to every opportunity. And honestly, that is okay because sometimes, taking on less than ideal clients actually helps you build your client base. It gives you experience. But amongst that, there is one non negotiable rule: always say no if your reputation is at stake. For example, let's say there's a parent who wants you to teach their child in a way that you just know won't work. They're putting that pressure on you. If you agree, and if it doesn't work as you predicted, that parent is very unlikely to hold their hands up and tell people, do you know what? I was probably too pushy and what I suggested didn't work. They're more likely to blame you. So it's fine to say yes to less than ideal clients. I understand sometimes you might be under financial pressure, but don't compromise on your reputation because your reputation will, in the long term, it will sell for you without you really having to do very much. Now, linked to my first point, but something that's really important is not to feel pressurized to get everything right. So, this is what my fifth tip is all about: niching down, getting your pricing right, having the perfect marketing strategy, ticking every single box. These are really fantastic goals. But when you're just starting, it's okay to just experiment and try things out and learn as you go along. In fact, dare I say it, 8 years on, I'm still learning as I go along. It never stops. Take my example. Back in September 2024, I launched the Upgrade Your Mindset book club. Now, I was a little bit apprehensive because I was aware I was taking on more work, but it's something I really wanted to try. So I made sure I had an out, I had an easy way of pausing it or stopping it, and I went for it. Now, 3 months later, 4 months later, I realized that it really was too much work and it was taking me away from my clients, which for me is a non negotiable. And so I made a bit of a big deal about it. I stopped it. If you're connected with me on social media, you'll know that I did announce that. And I did it publicly because I really wanted to demonstrate that you can change your mind about things and it's fine. Nothing bad happens. No one thinks badly of you. And if they do, that's okay. So if you're feeling a little bit nervous, just start. Just start because you can tweak as you go along. Remember that you will never cover every single what if scenario. You can just tackle them as they come. My sixth tip is to compete with yourself instead of other people. It's really nice when you see people share their successes online. It can be really inspiring. But when you're just starting out, it can sometimes add a layer of pressure. If you've been trying different things, but you're not getting results straight away, sometimes you feel like, when will this happen for me? And that's when insecurity can creep in. That's when impatience can kick in. And actually, when we feel like that, we sometimes make wrong decisions. So, a better approach is to actually compete with yourself. So, instead of trying to get loads of students, just focus on getting one. Just focus on getting one student. That's your goal. Because when you can get one, you can get another. And if you just focus at any time on just getting one student, you are constantly achieving your goal. And if you really want to stretch yourself, maybe you think, right, this time I'm going to try and get 2 students this month. Either way, when you're competing with yourself, then you don't feel insecure. You don't feel impatient. Instead, you really focus on what you need to do to achieve your target. When you focus on what other people are doing, then your target gets really diluted and you try and achieve their target. So celebrate progress, always celebrate progress. I don't do that enough. And give yourself permission to grow at your pace. So I've shared quite a lot, so I'll quickly recap those 6 steps. Number 1, don't overcomplicate things. Start with the basics. Get going, and you can do things later on. Number 2, make sales before worrying about getting things like your marketing absolutely perfect. Remember that marketing is a long game. Number 3, charge confidently. Remember that you are an expert in what you're delivering. Number 4, know when to say yes and know when to say no. The no that I talked about, the non-negotiable no, is when you're in a situation where your reputation is at stake. So always ask yourself, is this a situation that's just not ideal? Or is this a situation that could potentially damage my reputation? Number 5 is to remember not to stress about getting everything in place and everything right from day one. You don't want to cover all the what ifs because you can't. And my 6th step is to compete with yourself instead of competing with other people. Now, I know that launching your education business can feel overwhelming at times. There's a lot to do, but we don't need to add to that overwhelm by trying to get things perfect, by focusing on things that are nice to have, things that can come later. Remember what I said earlier, you actually have a business when you make your first sale, not when you have a logo, not when you have a website. It's when you actually start making sales. So prioritize that. I know it's a cliche, but remembering to focus on progress instead of perfection is actually really, really valuable. So just take that small step and then take another step after that. And if you want any support, then come and speak to me. The Tutors Mastermind is a membership, which means it's totally flexible. It's not a course. You can pick and choose exactly what you want. And in there, I have got a specific course if you like, but you can still pick and choose a specific area for launching your business. Thanks as always for tuning in, and you'll hear from me again on Wednesday. Would you like to take this discussion further? Perhaps you have some questions or you'd like more ideas on tailoring your business. If so, book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes.